Well, there's a basic moral principle that was, for a long time, conventional wisdom in this country. You probably grew up with it. It was this: people deserve to be treated as individuals, judged by their own efforts and their abilities on the things they can control. Attacking people on the basis of their race is wrong. That was the standard, and for a long time, almost everybody in America believed it or claimed to believe it. Not anymore. On the left, it's now acceptable, even encouraged, to attack and discriminate against people solely on the basis of their skin color. Now, you're not supposed to say anything about it, but suddenly it's everywhere. Consider The Root, for example. It's an online magazine owned by the media company Univision. It's not some obscure hate site lurking in the dark corners of the internet. It's considered a mainstream destination. It's got 8 million visitors a month. It's supported by huge advertisers like Toyota. Here are some recent stories The Root has published. Quote, "White people need to be better people. 5 life hacks for black people who want to leverage white guilt to make white people uncomfortable at work. We need a reset button or something for white people. The most useless types of white people ranked." There are plenty more just like that. You can Google it if you want. The articles have a pretty clear intent to attack and ridicule an entire race for the crime of being born with certain genes. Now imagine a news website that tried to rank the most useless types of fill-in-the-blank people. Would you be embarrassed to read something like that? We hope you would be. Would Toyota advertise on a site that ran a piece like that? Come on, of course not. But it advertises on The Root, and The Root is not alone, not even close to alone. Take a look at BuzzFeed. It's one of the most popular websites in America. In 2016, that company was valued at $1.5 billion. That's 6 times what Jeff Bezos paid for the Washington Post a couple of years ago. Just last week, BuzzFeed published a piece entitled 37 Things White People Need to Stop Ruining in 2018. One of the items on the list, America. Now, that's not just wrong, it's nuts. It's actually suicidal. As liberals are always correctly reminding us, America is a multiracial society, which is great. Racial societies are great, multiracial ones, but they're fragile, always. And they only survive when people of different races decide to treat each other as human beings with equal dignity. When they square off into warring tribes, it's over. Now, liberals say they abhor white nationalism, and they should, but at the same time, they're promoting it with crap like this. When liberals pull up BuzzFeed for the latest listicle on why white people are wrecking America or whatever, they're happy to laugh along because they're safe in the knowledge it doesn't actually threaten them. But the joke looks a lot different when you're not rich. Imagine you're a machinist on disability in Akron. You've lost family and friends to heroin. You haven't painted your house in 20 years. Everybody you know is being crushed by the rising cost of education and health care. You're fairly certain your kids are going to make even less than you do, assuming jobs will even exist when the robots get here. You're worried, and you should be. And now some smug private school kid from Brooklyn is lecturing you about how you're the problem because of the color of your skin and the privilege it conveys. How much of that are you going to take before you explode at the unfairness of it all? And at that point, why wouldn't you embrace a racial identity? Everybody else seems to be doing it. That's a disaster, and it's not theoretical, by the way. That's what's going to happen in this country unless people start deciding they're going to treat one another as individuals rather than as members of groups. Jason Nichols is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland, and he joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So my concern here is that pieces like this, attitudes like this, which are ubiquitous on the affluent left, the privileged left, are driving the country apart along racial lines to an even greater extent than we are already divided by racial lines, and that you're going to wind up with a totally balkanized society. I don't know why people would do this, and I don't know when it became okay to do this.
Okay, so when we talk about what drives us apart as a society, let's talk about the fact that black people are 3 times more likely to be denied for a home loan, that you have a better chance of getting employment with a high school diploma than I do with a college degree. Let's talk about many other structural issues that we have.
Happy to, but you're not answering my question, which is, why does this help? I mean, we've always been divided along racial lines. It's a tragedy. It's one of the worst things. It's the worst thing about America. And you don't want it to get worse, which is why you don't attack people on the basis of their race in public. And now, all of a sudden, the left has decided that's okay. This seems crazy to me.
Well, see, again, you have to enter in nuance and context here. I think that many of these articles that you brought up are actually lampooning the ridiculousness and absurdity of racism itself. They're trying to turn racism on its head and say, look, if white people do these things, this is absurd. So, and again, in a society where white people, I know you don't like.
Joke?
I think it's a satire.
If it's a satire, then, but you know that nobody, I mean, if you were at BuzzFeed and you said, I've got an idea for a piece, how about 37 reasons Mexicans are wrecking America? You'd be canned. You'd be in HR at very least. Okay.
You should be.
So why is it okay to say that about another race? If we really believe that it's wrong to attack people on the basis of their race, why isn't it wrong to attack people on the basis of their race?
Because if you put out this article, one of those articles, and black people or Mexican people or whomever said that about white people. Let's say 80% of the black outlets and Latino outlets said these things about white people. It would not affect white people in terms of their socioeconomic status, their health outcomes, their housing, their education, or incarceration. None of that would be affected.
But you're basically okay. But you're living in a world. You're living in a world that doesn't exist anymore. You're living in a world where all the rich people are white and all the poor people are non-white. In modern America, the one group of Americans whose life expectancy is declining is working class white people. I'm not whining about this on racial lines. I'm just saying, if you're one of those people, you're saying, why are you attacking me? I don't have any privilege. Why are you doing this to me? And you're pushing, stuff like this pushes people to be more racially conscious, which is bad, in my opinion, if you see what I'm saying.
So again, I think if we want to talk about the way people experience poverty, I think, first of all, it's been proven that a black person who makes $100,000 is actually going to live in a poorer neighborhood with fewer resources than a white person who makes less than $25,000.
Look, I'm not.
White poverty and black poverty are not equivalent.
Okay, but I'm just saying, the life expectancy of working class white people is in decline. That's true for no other group. I'm not saying they have the toughest road to hoe. I'm just saying it's bad, actually. We all know that.
And I would agree.
Why are rich private school hipsters from freaking Brooklyn attacking them like they're all living in Palm Beach? Like, why wouldn't that stir resentment?
I looked at some of those BuzzFeed articles, and certainly I've looked at the Root articles, and for the most part, they're attacking the wealthy people that move people out of Brooklyn, not the working class person in Alabama.
But you can see why. Look, I think we see why this would lead to resentment. We don't need any more resentment in America from anybody, I would think.
Absolutely not.
But how about, let's just make it super simple and just say, probably a bad idea to make generalizations about people based on their skin color, because it's not the most important thing about people, actually.
And again, I think you need to look at these articles. Where in many cases it's not just about race. Class is in there as well. And again, if you're looking at it, intelligently and with nuance, you will see that they're actually lampooning racism. They're trying to say how ridiculous racism is.
This isn't. They're attacking a group. You're seeing this. Of course they are, because you can't say it about any other group, as you know. There's only one group you can attack. I hate even to say this out loud, because it sounds like whining, and I hate whining. I just honestly think you're pushing a whole group of people to become way more racially conscious, and I don't want to live in a country where everyone primarily identifies by race. Do you? No, you don't.
Well, first of all, we live in a country where race and race consciousness is forced upon all of us.
But you don't want more of it, do you?
And I don't think that these articles are doing that. I think they are trying to show how absurd racism is. That's the whole point.
But only white racism, as if that's the only kind, and that's not true.
That's the only kind that has systemic consequences on people.
Boy, I'm telling you, it's just not fair to say to someone who lives in the middle of the country, whose economic prospects have been devastated, who really doesn't have much of a future, you're part of the problem? Really? Like, in what world is that person oppressing anybody?
Yeah,
like,
and I honestly don't think that most of those articles are saying that about that person who's in the middle of the country, who is suffering economically.
It just seems like another example of the powerful mocking the weak in order to feel virtuous.
And I hate that. Well, first of all, I would disagree that some, writer or staff writer or contract writer for the BuzzFeed represents the powerful. That guy's making $40,000 a year.
Name one who went to public school in the Midwest. I bet you can. Anyway, we're out of time. Congressman, thank you. Rather, Congressman.
Well, maybe in the future.
I hope you'll announce on this show, Professor. Good to see you. Chadwick Moore is a journalist in New York City, home of Brooklyn, and people who write for BuzzFeed, and he joins us tonight. Chadwick, I know I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I can kind of picture the staffer in question sneering at the middle of the country and maligning an entire group based on their skin color, which I thought was not allowed.
Right. Yeah, I don't believe your guest for one second when he thinks, your former guest, when he says he thinks that these articles are meant to be satire and make fun of racism. No. It's exactly, I think, how you painted it. These sort of liberal Oberlin kids who graduated and live in Brooklyn and for some reason want to believe in this sort of dismantle the wealth narrative, and they think the way to do that is to attack white people. I mean, it's Marxism, it's socialism, and it has the mainstream media's ear. It has mainstream society's ear. When you see these people who obsess over victimhood so much, it's so fascinating, because if you want to see racism everywhere, if you're brainwashed to see racism everywhere, or homophobia everywhere, or whatever, then you will. That's the world you will live in. You know, I was having a conversation with a woman not too long ago about this, a young upper middle class black woman, and she was talking about how badly she gets treated on the street here in New York. And I said to her, what if you lived for one day as a white woman and you were treated the exact same way? People were just as rude to you. What then?
Yeah, it doesn't make anybody happier to see everything through that lens. So let me ask you about something that happened yesterday on The View. I personally missed it, but I've seen the tape. Maybe you saw. Co-host Joy Behar reacted to the ongoing protests we've been seeing in Iran by saying the U.S. is on the very brink of executing gay people in the streets. Watch this.
It's not apples and apples. It's not equal. But we're on a very slippery slope in this country toward throwing democracy out the window every single day.
We have to defend the freedom of the press and civil rights here.
We do, but we're not being stoned in the street for being gay.
Not yet. They're completely.
Now, how close do you think we are to a country where people are stoned in the streets for being gay, as Joy Behar suggests?
Look, I have to tell people this all the time. We can't even get funding for the wall, so the gay death camps are definitely not happening till the second term. I mean, we really have some time to battle this. She's completely ridiculous. This narrative that they want to push is so absurd. There's no proof to it. It's total, it's just such a load of bull. I don't know, in that same discussion, she was sort of ironically saying that the protesters in Iran and the so-called women's marchers here, these resist protesters, she called them protesters, are basically fighting for the same thing. And she said, well, the details are different about what they're fighting against. But the general thing, that they want democracy and freedom, and ours is deeply under attack in this country. All right, well, firstly, let's talk about that. In Iran, you have women tearing off their headscarves and in their hijabs. And here in New York and in Washington, women and men, liberal men, putting them on as a symbol of liberation.
Of course.
And when she says it, yeah, it's so funny to see her saying our democracy is under attack.
But it's also, I mean, it's such grotesque overstatement. And I know what it's like to get mad on television, but part of your brain says, pull back a little bit. Don't say more than you mean. Don't overstate things grotesquely, because if you do, you're going to be called on it. And you shouldn't say things that aren't true. No one ever calls anybody on the left when they say ludicrous things like gays are about to be stoned in the streets. What?
Yeah, exactly. It's just this hysteria, and they have no evidence for it. They have absolutely no evidence for it, and it's exactly, they're just showing who they are. They have no argument.
It's childish.
Yeah, it's very childish.
Chadwick Moore, great to see you.
All right, thank you, Tucker.
Thanks.